We start this last part of our application by capturing the current date and time and storing it in the poll timestamp variable for later use. So this is how we do it right here. Next, let's have a look at the lists and dictionaries we just created with the OpenSSHCon function. So let me uncomment this print statement and run the application one more time. So here we have the list of CPU utilization values, one value for each router. Next, we have the list of processor memory percentages. So this one is over here. Next, the I/O memory percentages. And finally, the up interfaces percentages on each router. Then we have the dictionaries where we paired each host name with the values we need to get the top 3 consumers in different categories. So these are the dictionaries right here. Now let me comment these print statements back and save the application. Next, I defined a function that will determine the top 3 consumers for each network resource we monitor using this program. I named this function simply top3, and it takes each of these dictionaries as a parameter. The first thing I did inside this function is refer to a variable, which is declared as being global, so top3 list, because we will use it further in the code. Then I created an empty list, top3. We will see its use in a moment. Now you should focus on this next piece of code. For each dictionary, we want to finally get a string of 3 host names separated by comma, in which the first host name represents the largest consumer in the network for a particular resource. The second host name is the second largest consumer, and the last one is the third largest consumer. So, as the function name implies, we want to get the top 3 consumers. Now, to understand this code, let's grab one of these dictionaries right here. So, let's say this one. And go into the Python interpreter for a short recap. So Python, let's assign it to a variable. So let's say CPU equals and paste. Okay, let's see it. Okay. First, let's remember the items dictionary method. So CPU.items. This method returns the key value pairs as tuples, which are members of a list. Next, remember we can iterate by both key and value at the same time over the list returned by the items method. So let's say for I and j in CPU.items, and let's say print I, j. Now remember the function for sorting the elements of a list? That's right, it's the sorted function. So let's do the same thing as above, only this time applying the sorted function. For ij in sorted CPU.items. Okay, let's print I and j. Notice that this time we have the pairs printed out and sorted by the key. So we have R1, R2, R3, R4, and R5 in ascending order. That's not what we want. We want to sort them in descending order from the biggest consumer to the third biggest consumer. So we should look at the value, not at the key. In this case, we should tell this to the sorted function. So the good news is that you can pass a lambda function to sorted using the key attribute. So let's refer to the second value in the tuples returned by the items method using index 1. So for ij in sorted of CPU items, comma, key equals lambda x, and let's say x of 1. And of course print I and j. Okay, now we are getting closer to the correct result. We've sorted the pairs by values, but they are in ascending order. To get the order reversed, let's add something I've already shown you. Let's add, comma, reverse equals true, and also print I and j. Nice, now we have a descending order for our values, but we don't want all of them, just the first 3. If we go ahead and execute only the sorted function as we have it right now, we see that it is still a list. So let's try it. Okay. Now to extract the first 3 elements in the list, we should write a slice, correct? So starting from the beginning of the list, we want the elements at indexes 0, 1, and 2. This means we have to add a slice at the end. So let's test this. A colon and 3. Okay, let's end the slice. Print I and j. Okay, great. We finally got what we wanted. Now let's get back to our for loop in the application. So for each iteration over this list, we append the hostname to the top 3 list and then join those 3 hostnames into a single string. using the join method. This string will then be sent to the database in the table corresponding to that particular resource. The next thing I did is I defined 4 similar functions, each inserting some data into one of the 4 corresponding tables in the database. I'll explain the first one, and I'm sure you will be able to make the necessary analogies for the next ones. So the CPU average function calculates the average CPU utilization in the network using this formula by adding all the values in the CPU values list, notice the sum function, and dividing that sum to the number of devices, notice the len function. Then it calls the top3 function for the top3 CPU dictionary to get the string of hostnames we discussed earlier. Finally, having these values in memory, it calls the SQL connection function to insert the average CPU utilization value, the string of hostnames, and the timestamp into the corresponding MySQL table. So, notice the variables being inserted right here. The next 3 functions do the same things and insert the values in the correct tables, nothing more. After calling each function, we are using an if-else block at the end to check the final value of the check_SQL flag and print a message to the user for each possible value. So if the check_SQL flag has the value of true, that means that all parameters were successfully exported to MySQL. Otherwise, if the check_SQL flag is kept false, then you have some problems with the MySQL database exporting process, and the user is prompted to check the files, database, and sqlerror.txt file. Next, to wrap things up, we are going to do some tests.